28, the picture was taken a little while ago. I've been a multi-time entrepreneur, but this is my first time doing a Silicon Valley venture startup, kind of shooting for the moon with that. I came in with a very limited Silicon Valley network, so like didn't really know any investors. We raised some friends and family money, but that was it. So that's kind of where I was starting at. And Greg, can we go to the next slide? So this is my company. We are Osmo Systems, and we are bringing aquaculture into the 21st century. And we're starting with a low-cost online water quality monitoring system. The problem that we're solving is that 50% of seafood in the world today is farmed, but it's an industry in which technology hasn't really changed over the past 30 years. And so we are starting with a low-cost monitor that is based around optical sensors with the goal of being able to bring the 99% of ponds and tanks today that are not online, bring them online and get their data going to the cloud. So it was actually in September that we closed our seed funding round. It was led by Ben Rock, who was a great partner, and I probably talked to about 80 VCs in the process. So my experience and my story with it. So wanted to structure the talk like this. So first, going through kind of just like questions that you need to have good answers for before you go raise. So I'll get into a bit more of what those questions are. Go into what emotion you want to generate when you're going out to raise. Laying out what that timeline is. Walking through actually like how you build your network kind of from square zero. What materials you'll need to be able to actually go out there, so the nitty-gritties, and then just some random tips. And then if we have questions, feel free to raise your hand during, but I will also be answering them at the end. Greg, go ahead. So before you go out and really start your raise, and when I talk about a raise, and you'll see this more, a raise is like a concerted chunk of your life. It takes over. It is your full-time job. You can't just be like doing it half-time or part-time, mainly working on the product. No, you're not going to be successful. It needs to be full-time. So before you go out and you say, okay, I'm ready to do this, there's a few questions that you need to have a lot of conviction around. And so the first is this opportunity venture scale? And by venture scale, I mean, is there an opportunity for you, the number that's thrown around is like $1 billion company. What it really means is there an opportunity for you to create some kind of incredibly competitive company that is very difficult for anyone else to copy and come in, so that you could really elbow out and quickly carve a large part of the marketplace? Nope. Number two, again, all of these feeling conviction of why you and not others will win that opportunity. Sure, you realized it, but whether it's your technology or your marketing abilities or just who you are as a person, your team, why is it you that will allow you to win this ability, to win this opportunity? And thinking that there's really only going to be one. And then finally, this comes to traction. How do you know that companies or people want your product or service? So how are you able to actually demonstrate this? So this could be, the best way is with cash. They paid you for them. But then below that could be like purchase orders, letters of intent, general, even like fans of yours, they've invested, things like that, that you're able to actually demonstrate. Because a lot of the investors you're talking to are not going to be an expert in your space. So they need to be able to see, okay, I don't get this, but I talked to a bunch of other smart people who did, and they want it, and they want to put their money into it. And that helps a lot.
Is it possible for you to send us this next?
Yeah, this should be posted online on the Hardware Massive page. So yeah, and if not, you can take a picture of my email at the end and feel free to email me. The number one thing you want to build when you are fundraising is this. For the millennials in the crowd, you'll know this term, FOMO, fear of missing out. When you're going out to fundraise, you will be successful if you are able to create a marketplace around your company. There's only one of you, and there's potentially a lot of customers out there who want to buy you. So you need to create that marketplace. And the way to do that is by creating, maintaining, and then closing based upon this. You want your investors to be like, oh fuck, I got to get in on this before the next guy does. That's when you've been successful. And so let's walk through how to do that. I apologize for the lack of any kind of good graphics in this presentation, but it should be pretty explanatory. So this is a timeline, and we're starting, and you'll see we'll go into negative days, but starting with day 0. So this is the very beginning of your raise. And from day 0 to 14 is when you want to pack in all of your first meetings. This is with new investors that you have not met before, or ones that you potentially networked with, but you hadn't pitched formally. You would be having 5 to 7 meetings a day, if you can. Really cramming them in. Having some kind of system to be able to track how things are going, kind of a classic sales pipeline, something like that. So that way you can have all of those first meetings in the same stage. Remember, you want to be creating FOMO. So doing it all at the same time is going to be very beneficial. And I lay this out of like 0, 14, 28. Obviously the real life numbers are very different, but it's more just to demonstrate the how important keeping your timelines tight, and the more you can compress, the more likely you'll be to be successful. So that way, your goal is that when you hit day 14, okay, you've done all your first meetings, maybe a few more are trickling in, but you've really done the bulk of them. That, you know, you're working on something weird, you're working on hardware, so sure, a lot of people are going to be like, look, I like you, but like, this is just not for me. So a bunch of people will pass, which is why you want to do a bunch of meetings, because you're playing the numbers game. But a bunch of people won't. And so they'll start entering into due diligence and having second meetings with you. They'll want to meet your co-founders. They'll want to talk to your advisors. They'll want to talk to potential customers. Really dig into this. Read market reports. I mean, you know, we were talking about fucking fish farming. Like, people don't know anything about that. So we really had to do a lot of hand-holding about what the industry was. And a lot of education. A lot of that came after that. Because the first meeting was just like, do you like, you know, do they like Zach? And does he seem full of shit? And if I get past that test, then the next one is on the due diligence. And so again, you're compressing all of those meetings into that 2-week period, because your goal is to keep people in the same phase as you're going. So that way by the end, and again, you'll get more passes. You'll be whittling it down. So you'll have kind of the top firms that they've invested the most amount of time in you. And they don't want that to be a sunk cost necessarily, because their time is very valuable. So your goal is that by the time you get to the end of this period, where you're in partner meetings, you're in that, it's that final, like, yes, no, are we going to give this company a term sheet that you have? It's not just, you don't just have one. You're not just waiting there, sitting there, thinking, oh, I really hope this comes through, because if not, we're screwed. Because then, you know, that firm, or that VC, or that angel, whatever it be, they've got all the power. They can take as long as they want. Investors love taking their time, because they get to lose nothing unless they have FOMO. Because they just get to see what's going to happen later. Are you going to make that advancement? Are you going to land that customer? Or are you going to mess up? They don't have to do that risk. But if you have 5 to 6 that they know that you're competing against, that they're directly competing against, because there's only going to be room for one lead investor in your round, and they all want to be that lead investor, that's when you've done your job right. And so, at the end of it, hopefully, you'll get multiple term sheets. You'll be able to leverage them off each other to get the best deal possible. And that's how the system is going to work at the end of the day. So then you can go ahead and you can sign one of those, the one that's going to be best for you. Tell your other investors sorry, or maybe you can follow on and keep going from there. You've known you've done it successfully. And again, so that's starting at day 0. I'll try and compete with the ice machine. Any questions before we move on to what you do to line up all of those first meetings. Yeah.
Do you find a lot of these, like, sometimes people want to cold email people via LinkedIn. Do you touch into your network via communities like this? For you individually, you found 6, you said, and you pitted them against each other to kind of get the best term sheets you could. How did you, meet these first 6 people? Was it through this kind of community?
So that was by the end. We talked about, I went at about 80 first meetings. And so, got whittled down. It was not me saying no, it was them saying no. And I'll get into exactly like how we built that network and how kind of network building operates, or I've seen it to be successful in general. So I'll get to that in the next slide. So from day 0 to negative 21 of when you're going into this fundraise, this is when you're really investing your time building that first 2 weeks. And that means you're building all of those intros to be able to pack them in. And so kind of going back to 3 weeks beforehand, that's when you're working, hopefully you have advisors or you yourself know a lot of people, but with your advisors, with people in your network that you've been able to cultivate, and I'll get into how to cultivate that in a second, to build that pipeline. Who are potential investors that could be interested in you based upon your space where you're at? There's going to be plenty that aren't, but there's plenty that could be. So building out that pipeline and just making that list of saying, okay, these are all of our potential targets. And then going through with your advisors and with your personal network of thinking, okay, who do I know, how can I get intros to these people? And so who do you know that knows them? Do you know them directly? Could your advisors do it? Other people, these are like accelerators are very helpful for things like this. Again, I'll get into it further. But who do you know that you can get those intros so you can line them up? And so that's when, and then what you need to do is really, in the next week, and it's both very simple and very complicated, but you need to perfect your blurb. And what a blurb is 2 to 3 sentences, maybe 4, that is very excited, is describing what you're doing, and is really highlighting the good stuff. And this is what you're going to send to the people who are going to be requesting intros to you, that they'll be forwarding to potential investors. And so that blurb, that's your first, hey, this is me. So that's the first way you're representing yourself. So give it the time and need to have a really good one. So go through iterations, include links so that you can be able to back things up. Do you have just like an awesome founding team where you have PhDs from here, or previous startup experience, or you have this kind of traction, or just oh, this market is so out of left field, you got to look at it. There's got to be something there that stands out within that blurb. So when you feel comfortable with that, then what you do is you go and you take that list of the people, the investors you're targeting, who you think can get you an intro there, and you email the person who's giving you an intro. And you say, hey, friend, hey Bob, investor X, in a week, when I ask you, could you email them my blurb and ask if they would like to meet? You do that for all the investors on your list, all the ones that you can get intros to. So that way, when you're getting up, when you're approaching day 0, that's when you start sending out. You have your network start sending out asks for introductions for those first meetings, and that's when they start getting lined up. And that's how you start to pack in that week, or days 0 to 14. Okay, does that make sense?
That gives a very short time between when you send people the thing and the meeting. Do they normally have a meeting within 2 weeks of when you send them?
Not usually. Usually you can get something lined up. This is investors' full-time jobs, is to take meetings with people like you. So you want to stay top of mind as much as possible. And another reason for doing that is everyone talks to each other. So it's oh, you met with Osmo Systems? So did I. What do you think? You get all of that kind of buzz going as well.
But it's a good idea to say, can I have a meeting with you in the next 2 weeks, or to say, to schedule it further ahead?
No, you would not want to schedule it further ahead. And I'll get to how, it'll be my random tips, but when that email introduction is made, how to handle it. But yeah, you want to get, and so what's going to happen is that a percentage of those investors will like email back your buddy who asked for an intro and be like, nah, not my space, or don't have time, or whatever. And so like, okay, you'll have to find it, you know, it doesn't mean give up. It just means find other people that can intro you to that same person. Because eventually, once you hit a critical mass, that investor's just like, oh man, like 3 people who like I really like and respect have emailed me and like told me I gotta meet this guy. Then they're gonna be like, okay, I'll take a meeting. And then what's amazing is that you get confirmation bias going in your favor. Is that when you walk through that door, because 3 different people said like this person's awesome, like you gotta meet them, that investor's then going to just try and prove to themselves why you're awesome. Rather than if it's a weak intro or even like something cold, you know, their more analytical mind is just going to be like trying to poke holes in what you're doing. Okay, so how do you build your own network? One of the best ways starting out before this slide is accelerators can be really helpful. They're there to help startups get in this. There's a wide range of them. Y Combinator is at the top of the pile. You can get in. Its reputation is changing, but it's still at the top. Being able to do that, you're giving away part of your company for access to a network and to resources for people who will help you. It definitely does not mean that you will raise money. It is by no means a guarantee. You still will, unless you are like hot shit, you still will have to go through this type of process. But they can really help with the intros or help get you in front of people who could get excited about your company and then be able to help you through this process. So, how do you build your own network in Silicon Valley? There's kind of 2 classes of people that you want to get to know. You want to get to know other founders, especially other founders who have raised. And you want to get to know investors, obviously. But focusing on the founders side, some of the best introductions come through founders to their own lead investors. If an investor is invested in a founder, they then obviously really respect that person. So that person coming and saying like, hey lead investor, I met this person at an event last night. I think like you got to check them out. There's something here. That's a really powerful and strong intro. So on that side, you want to anyone you know who's a founder. This is former coworkers, current coworkers, you know, your LinkedIn, people you went to high school with, anything like that. You want to make a spreadsheet and you want to get them on there. And again, people you think you may be tangentially connected. That you could also ask, it's like, hey, I'm looking for help to talk to other founders. And I'll get to exactly like how to structure that on the bottom half of the slide. And then the same thing is for investors. If you know investors specifically, there's a lot of things you can do without formally pitching them, but to get help. And this is especially if they like you. If someone likes you, they're like, oh, Zach, yeah, of course, like, I'll help you out. That can be really powerful. If they don't know you that well, but they know you a little well, it can still be useful. And again, being able to tap people, going through your entire network and thinking like, who could you get connections to here? You know, does it happen that the guy that you played intramural sports with in college now works for this company? Maybe they know someone. That's kind of where you want to be starting out. So like kind of that 0 to -21 period, that can extend backwards for a long time as you're building your own network. And then when looking at your own network and asking for intros, and as you're going through this process of building it, can you see this? There's kind of, this is not exact science, but I kind of put together my thoughts on this, is that you, unless you know the person really well, it's just like, oh, a brother-in-law, I can ask them for anything, you don't want to go in directly asking for intros. It's just off-putting. You seem kind of dickish, and it's not actually building a relationship. And so instead, If you're, low or even medium in terms of like how close you are to that person, so that's founder, people who knows founders, investor, or people who knows investors, go and ask them for help. Go and say, hey, I'm going to be kicking off our seed raise soon. Never done this before. I'm just looking to talk to other founders or talk to investors to either, if it's talk to founders to hear their story. So making a specific ask then, with friends who could know founders, like, do you know anyone that you could connect me with? So that kind of help. And then if you get in front of a founder, again, if they like you, they could be making intros for you. And the same can be said for investors. And again, when it starts getting in that high category, you could be a bit more direct because they already know you, they already respect you. It's not going to harm the relationship at all for you to make that kind of ask. Okay, so the things that you'll need before you go and fundraise. The first thing, we talked a little about this, you'll need a blurb. This is your 2 to 4 to 5 sentence little thing that you copy at the bottom of an email that describes who you are. Anyone who is talking about your company is going to say, hey, like, can you shoot me over a blurb? Like, I'm interested in learning about it. And that's just kind of like, the 30-second digest, read it when they're in between kind of instant yes, no filtering. Again, that's why it has to be so good and you should give so much attention to it. Second material you'll need what's called a sending deck. It's not an official term, people call it different things. But this is a deck that is like 10 or 11 slides that someone could just flip through like this in like 90 seconds and get a decent idea of what you're doing and how you're presenting yourself. So this is not necessarily the one that you're actually going to be formally pitching with, but it should be like related. It shouldn't be a completely different deck. It should just be like a light version. It's essentially like a glorified visual version of your blurb. A really bad study deck is something that's lots of text, something that takes a really long time to read, something that is not interesting or engaging on the second slide. You need to put something out there that is grabbing attention. Third, this is what you're going to when you're actually going to these meetings. So this is your formal pitch deck plus appendix. So your formal pitch deck, this is what you're going to be actually telling your own story. And so this is going through, talking through what you're doing, why you're doing it, the problem you're solving, traction you've had, who you are. And then in the appendix is, you try to only really keep what's necessary there. If you keep getting the same question again and again and again, it can make sense to include a slide from the appendix in the main deck. But otherwise, for a lot of those things, like extra pictures of one of our pilots, like in the appendix, a detailed breakdown of our estimated cost structure in the appendix, all of those kind of things, so that way you're not distracting from the actual storytelling process itself. And then when you finish the presentation, when you finish the pitch, it gets to become a conversation in which the deck is just that initial conversational tool that you're able to flip through. You're like, oh, I get a great slide for that to be able to do it. And then finally, and this will build as you continue to, all of this will get better and be tweaked as you're going through the process. But for number 4, having an internal list of customers, advisors, technical providers, and other people that could be relevant for diligence. Especially in hardware, it is just people, investors, they need to be able to talk to other people that are close to the company, not close to the company. They'll be doing their own diligence. So, for us, it's like that was an investor going through their network to find a fish farm that we didn't introduce them to, and asking like, hey, check out this website. Like, would you ever want this? Why or why not? So that's how they would diligence us. So having those materials of your internal ones, so that way if an investor says like, yeah, I'd love an intro to a few people, you'd have that available. A big caveat with that though is like, you don't want to like publicize it or do anything like that, because the last thing you want to do is like really piss off these people who are really close to your company, like advisors and customers, by having 20 emails come their way asking for quick phone calls about the company. So you have to kind of measure it at the same time, and always ask the customer, the advisor, etc. Like, hey, I got investor X, they'd really love to chat. You know, I know you've done a few of these. Like, would you be open for another one? You know, they say yes, then you go ahead and make the intro. Okay, random tips, and this is kind of going to get to your point. First thing, so emailing with investors. I definitely messed up on this a few times, but once you learn it, it's pretty simple. So let's say that you have, you know, your buddy introed you to an investor that you're excited to meet. So they say, you know, hey, I'd love to, you know, Zach, very excited to make this introduction to investor X. I'll let you guys take it from here. You want to email back literally as soon as possible and get this down there. But like, when you are fundraising, this is why it's a full-time job. You need to be a slave to your phone. Because it's just, like, especially early on, any kind of negative signal, like, you know, you took 2 days to get back to them, that could just be a reason, like, nah, I don't want to do it. So you don't want to give any reason for that. So being very prompt is going to be very key. So emailing back very quickly, saying, you know, keeping your email super short. They already know your company. They already said they want to meet you. You do not need to pitch them in this email. You can say, like, you know, thank the person who introed you, move them to BCC, and say, like, hey, investor, great to meet. Would love to chat about my company and yours. Here's a few upcoming windows that could work for me. Let me know. Look at your calendar, post some bullets, 3 windows. Always give times that could work for you. I made a mistake early on with one of the intros I got. I said, like, yeah, let me know any time that works for you. And I thought that was me being, like, generous and nice of, you know, trying to, like, be flexible in their schedule. And immediately, the advisor who had made the intro to that investor emailed me back. It was like, never fucking do that again. Because it is a waste of energy and brain space for someone to have to go through their calendar and look kind of amorphously like that. It's much easier if you constrict it into times that work for you. And if none of those times, then they'll suggest others. But always do that. The rule of 3 is a really good one to stick to there. I found it to be very helpful. Other people will disagree. That once you set and agree upon a time with an investor, is that, you know, you say, great, you know, send along my Sunday deck so you're able to, you know, see it in advance. So they're able to review what you're doing. Okay, number 2. If possible, if an investor is like, yeah, we can do a phone call or meet in person, always meet in person. Make that happen. Even, this was an interesting learning moment for me, even if it's with someone lower in the hierarchy, so it's with an associate, or, you know, they have all these different terms now, but even if it's with someone lower, it's way better to meet in person than with someone who's higher up and doing a phone call. Because when you're doing that person that's lower, you just, in person, you're able to use your own you know, force of personality in the group. You're able, like, you can really sell them and get them excited in an hour-long meeting in person. That it's just harder to do over the phone. And so if that internal excitement's been generated, yeah, it might take you a few more meetings to get to the top, but by the time it gets there, you will have built a lot more excitement and enthusiasm behind you to be able to do it. And so again, that's why even that first meeting is fine if it's with someone who's slowed down, but you really want it to be in person. A title change away from that, because investors are going to expect the CEO to be the face of the company. But for that first meeting, it really only needs to be you who's there as the CEO. You don't need the whole team. Don't pull your technical team away for like that 61st meeting. It's like, let them keep going. Everyone understands. You're going to be driving all over the place. Like, it's just easier for it to just be you. Second meeting is when they can bring in other people. Number 4. Again, I alluded to this before, and this is not a cliche. It's not. As kind of allayed in that outline, like, this is your full-time job. Like, there may be like small other parts of the product and business that you work on, but essentially during this fundraising time, that is what your job is. is to go out there and get this done. So be prepared for that, and kind of the sacrifices that's going to mean in terms of like what you're doing in your business at that point, and then also be prepared to answer emails at wonky times and things like that. Yeah, number 5, be just again, cannot emphasize this enough. Being very prompt. It does not mean that you need to answer every email within 5 minutes, but if it's gone over 24 hours, that's a faux pas, and that could be bad signal there. And so you want to avoid that if possible. If you could get to it within a couple hours, that's awesome. And finally, and I think that this is really important, be personable. It's really different. As much as possible, I found that the best outcomes I had was when pitching, it was a conversation. And it was not me up there presenting what we were doing. It's like, okay, thank you for the question. Now let's get back to the deck. It's just, you're not building relationships in that way. And that's one of the main things that investors are looking for in testing, is like, do I want to essentially get married to this person for the next 10 years? Because that's what it is, especially at the seed stage. It is a 10-year relationship. And a good investor is going to want to work very closely with you, especially a good seed investor. So, you being able to do this, and being real, kind of being silly, being able to make some jokes. Again, like you need to be the expert on what you're talking about, but you very much want to be trying to build relationship as you're going in there. So some things I would say, and usually went over pretty well. All right, well, you ready to talk about fish farming? So a little bit of not taking yourself too seriously, but also being really interested in what you're doing, especially depending upon how weird your startup is, like ours. Kind of seeing a lot of what you're doing as edutainment. A part of what you need to do is teach investors in a way that's very entertaining about your field and what you're working on.
Like you said, this is a full-time job. They look at hundreds of pitches and probably have investments in competing spaces even. So they're not going to sign NDAs, right? Did you feel like there was any secret sauce or anything you had to hold back? And at what point did you have to did they ever ask for a code walkthrough or something like that?
They never asked for a code walkthrough or anything from that. I think if an investor is asking that should raise some very big red flags. They should be able to see from your background and from their own diligence on you that you're not full of shit. And that if you you're able to demonstrate hey, this is working like we say it's working, or having multiple other people, customers in the field or pilots being yes, it's working like they said it's working. And sure, there can be bugs, it can be rough, all of these things. But doing an explicit code walkthrough on that, unless it's some fund that is incredibly precise or something, I don't even know. I'm not a technical person, but I would be highly skeptical of any investor who would want to do that. It could mean that again they have a company that's pretty similar in their portfolio, and they're just trying to jerk you around. Yeah.
How do you know that you're ready to start looking to start this process? I mean, should you have your contract manufacturing dialed in? Should you have already surpassed your beta testing for your product or for your software? How do you know when you were completely ready to go out, and that you looked good enough at that point to really start this process? Because I feel like it's crowdfunding. You have only one shot at this.
Yeah. Emily, can you go back to, keep going back kind of at the beginning. Here. You need to have really solid answers to these questions. And that's another thing that is really good to use your network for. It's another way you can get favors, is going out and pitching to people who are your friends, to people who are friendlies. And they get to poke holes. They get to be I'm still not convinced that this is venture scale, and here's why. And so, if you're not able to come up with a good answer to that criticism, especially if you hear from one person, fine, but if you hear from multiple people, then that probably means that there's a big flaw in your business plan, or your business model, what you're doing. But again, you don't need to write a formal business plan, but literally the plan that you want to do for your business. So on any of these questions, like I try to distill it to like, if you're able to answer these three really well, you're ready. All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope this was